Hey Hawks fan, it really feels like the Seahawks have been moving differently lately. While everybody was busy talking about the schedule release and all the primetime games, the team quietly made some roster moves that could end up mattering way more than people think. And once you really look at what's happening behind the scenes, you can kinda see the direction this team is heading into this season. There's a lot to talk about because some of these decisions definitely caught fans off guard. Make sure to leave a like on the video and drop "Go Hawks" down in the comments if you're rocking with this team, no matter what this season brings. The Seattle Seahawks quietly made a couple of roster moves that most fans completely missed, because all the attention this week was focused on the NFL schedule release, but these additions could actually tell us a lot about what John Schneider and Mike Macdonald are trying to build behind the scenes heading into training camp. While everyone was debating primetime games and playoff predictions, Seattle went out and signed two undrafted wide receivers, Trayvon Rudolph and Rashad Rochelle. And the interesting part is neither one of them even participated in rookie minicamp before getting signed. That alone immediately stands out, because normally these rookie minicamps are the perfect opportunity for coaches to evaluate fringe players up close, see how they move in person, and determine whether they fit the culture and system. But in this case, Seattle clearly saw enough on film and through background evaluations to move quickly anyway. That says a lot about how intentional these signings were. These were not random camp bodies thrown onto the roster just to fill numbers. The Seahawks clearly identified specific traits they believe can help this football team, especially when it comes to special teams and developmental depth. To make room for these signings, Seattle moved on from Dion Deal, the undrafted defensive lineman from TCU. That one is honestly a little surprising because there were people who believed Deal had a realistic shot to compete for a back-end roster spot thanks to his physical profile and versatility. But the Seahawks obviously did not see enough during rookie minicamp to continue investing in that projection. That is one thing fans are already starting to notice about this new era under Mike Macdonald. Competition feels very real. Nobody is guaranteed extra chances simply because they arrived with hype after the draft. If the coaching staff sees a better fit elsewhere, they move quickly. The other move that caught attention was Seattle reportedly waiving undrafted receiver Michael Briscoe because of a failure to disclose a physical condition. There were also reports mentioning concerns about inconsistency and drops during rookie minicamp practices. And when you combine those concerns with the fact that the Seahawks immediately brought in two new receivers, it feels pretty obvious that the staff wanted more reliability and more upside in those developmental spots. Now, when you actually look deeper into Rashad Rochelle, you start to understand why Seattle was interested. Last season at Indiana State, Rochelle posted 44 receptions, 863 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. That production jumps off the page immediately because the Seahawks have consistently targeted players who know how to create explosive plays after the catch-and-finish drives in the red zone. Rochelle may not be the tallest receiver at around 5'11", but he plays with legitimate speed and toughness. He originally started his college career at Rutgers before transferring, and one thing that repeatedly shows up when evaluating his game is his ability to impact special teams. That matters more than people realize. Fans always focus on offensive snaps when discussing receivers competing for the bottom of the roster. But for undrafted players, special teams is usually the real path onto the active roster. If you can cover kicks, contribute on returns, and play with consistent effort, coaches notice immediately. Seattle clearly believes Rochelle has the mentality and athletic profile to fight for one of those roles. And honestly, this roster still has room for a young receiver to emerge behind the bigger names. Then there is Trayvon Rudolph, another intriguing addition who brings a slightly different profile. Rudolph spent time at both Northern Illinois and Toledo, during his college career. He is another smaller receiver at roughly 5'10", but he brings quickness and versatility. One of the most interesting details here is his previous connection to Seahawks running backs, coach Thomas Hammock, who coached at Northern Illinois. Those connections absolutely matter during roster construction because trusted relationships can give coaches confidence in a player's work ethic and ability to fit inside the locker room culture. Seattle has quietly built a pattern over the years of targeting players with existing coaching relationships or strong football character backgrounds, especially when filling out the bottom of the roster. They want competitors. They want players willing to grind through special teams assignments and earn every rep. Rudolph fits that mold perfectly. He may not have had eye-popping production at Toledo, but the Seahawks clearly believe there is developmental value there. And what is really fascinating about all of this is the timing. These moves happened almost completely under the radar because the NFL schedule release dominated the headlines. But internally, the Seahawks are continuing to shape the final layers of this roster very carefully. John Schneider has always believed roster building is about maximizing competition from top to bottom, not just relying on star players. These signings reinforce that philosophy again. At the same time, Seattle fans are now starting to realize just how difficult the 2025 schedule actually looks. Once the full schedule came out, it became obvious the Seahawks were handed multiple brutal stretches that could define the entire season. One of those stretches begins in Week 4 against the Los Angeles Chargers, followed immediately by games against the San Francisco 49ers, Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs, and Chicago Bears. 4 of those 5 teams made the playoffs last season, and several of those matchups come under difficult circumstances involving primetime games and short rest situations. The Denver game especially stands out because Seattle has to travel to Mile High on a short week for Thursday night football. That is never easy for any team. Altitude, travel fatigue, reduced preparation time, and physical recovery all become major factors. Then immediately after that, the Seahawks face Kansas City in primetime before another nationally televised matchup against Chicago on Monday Night Football. That is an absolutely brutal sequence for a team trying to establish itself among the NFC contenders. And yet, internally, there is confidence this roster is built to handle adversity better than previous versions of the Seahawks. Mike Macdonald has already emphasized accountability, toughness, and consistency since arriving in Seattle. The culture shift has been obvious from the beginning of off-season workouts. What makes the second late-season gauntlet even more concerning is the timing. Seattle closes the year with difficult road games and multiple short rest situations against playoff-caliber teams, including the Eagles, Rams, and Panthers. That stretch could heavily impact playoff seeding and postseason momentum. Traveling across the country late in the season while managing injuries and fatigue is one of the hardest things any NFL team can deal with. Still, inside the building, there appears to be a belief that this challenge could actually sharpen the team rather than break it. The Seahawks are not building this roster to simply survive. They genuinely believe they can compete with anybody in the NFC. And honestly, when you look at the aggression Seattle has shown this offseason, whether through roster depth moves, coaching changes, or culture adjustments, it does feel like this organization is preparing for something much bigger than just sneaking into the playoffs. Even these smaller roster additions reflect that mentality. The Seahawks are not waiting around hoping current depth players improve. They are constantly searching for competition, constantly evaluating new options, and constantly trying to uncover overlooked talent before anyone else notices. That has always been one of John Schneider's biggest strengths, and it feels like this front office is doubling down on that approach again. Now the big question becomes whether one of these under-the-radar signings can actually surprise people once training camp begins. Every year, there is at least one undrafted player who forces coaches to take notice. Sometimes it starts with special teams. Sometimes it starts with preseason chemistry. Sometimes it simply comes down to effort and consistency. But these are exactly the kinds of players who often become fan favorites once the pads come on in August. And when you combine those hidden roster battles with one of the toughest schedules in football, this upcoming Seahawks season suddenly feels a lot more fascinating than people outside Seattle may realize. There is pressure, there is opportunity, and there is a very real sense that this team believes it can handle whatever gets thrown at it. But what do you think about these roster moves and the brutal schedule the Seahawks were handed this season? Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Seahawks news. And don't forget to click the video on your screen right now, because the biggest Seattle updates always happen here first.